In 1992, the police were called to a scene that they would never forget. A home in South London, Croydon, where a sad 89-year-old woman had been violently raped and subjected to the most horrific assault. They didn't know it then, but this would be linked to over 203 similar sexual assault and burglary charges in the surrounding areas and would continue for another 17 years. He was dubbed the UK Night Stalker because he would creep through the night and carry out the most horrific acts to the elderly, sometimes 3 or 4 in one night, and would disappear without a trace. For 17 years, authorities and the community were left baffled as they soon found out he was right there under their nose the whole time. Without any further ado, let's get into the disturbing case of the UK Night Stalker. On that night, the Night Stalker broke into a Croydon home where an 89-year-old woman was settling down to sleep when she heard a loud noise. She headed to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee, and once back in bed, she suddenly saw a man standing in the hallway. He raped her twice, causing horrific injuries. He stole money, a watch, and her jewelry. The ordeal was terrifying and lasted for hours, but luckily, although he escaped into the dark, he had left his DNA evidence behind. The Night Stalker waited a whole 16 years before he reoffended. It was 1998, and this time he subjected an 81-year-old woman to burglary, indecent assaults, and attempted rape. Another DNA sample was left at the scene, allowing these two horrific crimes to be linked, and the hunt was on for a predatory rapist attacking the elderly. Operation Mindstead was set up in 1998 and was the largest and most controversial investigation that Britain had ever seen. DNA evidence was found in 1992, which matched with the DNA evidence found at the crime in 1998, but disappointingly, no link was found to the DNA on the national database. In 1999, he struck again in Beckenham, Cowston, Croydon, Kent, and Oppington. He burgled 6 times, indecently assaulted 4 times, and raped another 2 elderly women. The burglaries and indecent assaults continued from 2002 to 2008. Many of his victims aged between 70 and 80 and were blind, deaf, or suffered with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. In 2001, Detective Superintendent Simon Morgan took charge. There were already 73 cases linked to the Night Stalker. Looking through the case notes, he realised that the perpetrator had a distinctive method. From the flattened grass found in the victim's gardens, police could see that the Night Stalker was prepared to wait for hours until he knew that a certain victim had gone to bed. He'd attack by carefully and quietly removing the window in one piece to gain entry, moving any ornaments away from the windowsills to avoid making noise as he entered. He'd switch off the electricity supply at the mains, cut the telephone wires, and unscrewed light bulbs around the house. He also placed mobile phones above cupboards, making them harder to find. The brutality of his attacks on the elderly left police with little to go on. Most victims were so traumatized they were unable to recall any details. It was left to behavioural profilers to help shine some light. They detected that he must have worked with the elderly at some point, as he used familiar techniques when lifting and moving his victims. They also worked out that he must have worked at night, as his comings and goings didn't arouse any suspicion. In nearly every case, the police were astounded at just how clean and tidy he was. It was believed that the person they were hunting must have had an obsessive-compulsive disorder. In order to move forward with the case, the police decided to use a pioneering new technique called ancestral DNA profiling. It proved the man they were looking for was of Caribbean descent, allowing them to reduce their number of suspects by several thousand. In 2007, the police saw the Night Stalker's pattern of behaviour changing. He became more focused on stealing money. More importantly, his careful planning was beginning to falter and mistakes were being made. In 2009, he broke into a Polish man's house in Croydon that ironically he later claimed he had robbed before. However, that time, the 88-year-old man hadn't gone to bed. The Night Stalker's sadistic side came to play and he wound up sexually assaulting him as well. It's believed that the assault was carried out to embarrass the man into not calling the police. Sadly, this was an effective method of silencing the elderly, as it's believed that the Night Stalker had committed over 200 offences. The police hoped that the recent accounts of burglaries would end in his capture, but it didn't. After the recent strings of sexual assault attacks in South London, on November 15th, 2009, police officers were covertly monitoring the area of Croydon following some recently reported attempted break-ins. In doing that, they found a man walking back to his car after trying to enter an elderly woman's home. That car was a silver Vauxhall Zafira. They knew it was the Night Stalker. The man they had been searching for over 17 years is right in front of them. He was promptly arrested and brought into the station for DNA testing. The man in question turned out to be Delroy Easton Grant. Who was he? What made him do it? And how on earth did he get away with it for 17 years? The only way for me to answer these questions is if I take you back to the very beginning. Delroy Easton Grant was born in Jamaica in 1957. At 2 years old, his mother walked out on the family and left Grant in the care of his elderly grandparents. Grant's father made the hard decision to move to the United Kingdom for a better life for him and his son. Grant arrived in Britain at age 15, and not long after, his career in crime began. Like most of the worst criminals to ever live, Grant started out in petty theft, then soon found himself getting involved in more serious offences like burglary, which led him to spending time in jail for armed robbery. In 1975, he met his first wife, Janet Watson. It must have been love at first sight, because within 2 weeks, they were engaged. Janet believed she had found the one, her Prince Charming, but boy was she wrong, because after the wedding, things took a dramatic turn for the worst. Janet discovered that Grant had an OCD obsession with tidiness and being in control. She learnt that knives and forks needed to be in the correct drawer and couldn't have any watermarks. If they were found, he would violently beat her. Grant had somewhat of a Jekyll and Hyde character. Out in public, he knew how to act like a model citizen and came across very down-to-earth and an intellectual man. But in his own home, he had to be the master, always in control, and his family must obey everything he said. The young couple had 2 children, but after 5 long years of abuse, Janet left. Grant ended up moving to Leicester, where he fathered another 2 children with a new and naive girlfriend, but this came to a halt in 1991 as he was sent straight back to prison for handling stolen goods. Shortly after that, the relationship ended and he headed back to southeast London. It's there where he met his second wife, Jennifer Edwards, a devoted Jehovah's Witness. The couple moved to a house in Brockley, southeast London, where they raised 2 boys and Jennifer's 2 girls from a previous marriage. Their marriage became difficult when Jennifer was sadly diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and Grant, also a former assistant in a care home, had to take care of her. He became a taxi driver by night and his wife's carer by day. His neighbours admired the way he looked after her. He was known as the foundation of the community, a good-natured, always smiling church-going family man. But unknown to them, beneath his deceitful exterior lay a sadistic, brutal rapist and burglar who targeted vulnerable elderly people and subjected them to the most horrific attacks. On the 3rd of March 2011, Delroy Grant appeared at Woolwich Crown Court to face 29 charges ranging from rape, indecent assault and burglary from 1992 to 2009. As you could expect, he denied all accounts. The jury heard that during Grant's initial arrest, he suggested to police that they have the wrong man and should be arresting his eldest son from his first marriage. It was clear that Grant had awareness of the number of breakthroughs in forensics and DNA, and he was hoping that his own son would share the same DNA and instead be convicted of his crimes. The jury were told that Grant's DNA proves a perfect match to the DNA samples found at the multiple crime scenes. Grant's first wife, Janet Watson, was put in the witness box to hear the shocking revelation that Grant believed he was being framed by her. He alleged that Janet stole some semen and saliva from him in 1977, and after their marriage ended, his DNA was stored at a hospital by a male friend. He then went on to say that 15 years later, his wife, out of malice, gave the DNA to someone else to frame Grant for a string of burglaries across southeast London. In all honesty, it was a startling web of lies, because in the 70s, the technique to recover DNA from semen and saliva hadn't been invented. It showed the jury what a desperate man would do to avoid punishment. While his fingertips were being taken in the police station, it was revealed in court that he arrogantly remarked, "I don't know why you're bothering, I always wear gloves." He took such lengths to avoid detection during his 17-year crime spree that none of his fingerprints were ever detected. The jury heard that on the night of his arrest, the police found in his Vauxhall Zafira a crowbar, a blue hoodie, a fleece, torch and a woolly hat. These were all the items linked to the crimes carried out by the Night Stalker. To add to this, the police explained that he was wearing a burglar's kit, which is 2 pairs of jeans, 2 pairs of boxer shorts, 3 t-shirts and 2 shoes, but no socks. This would have allowed him to change his appearances quickly, vital in helping him hide his tracks in CCTV footage. But in the end, the evidence was damning. On the 24th of March 2011, the jury found Grant guilty on all 29 charges. Police still believe he may have been responsible for another 600 attacks. Judge Peter Rook sentenced Grant to 27 years in jail and gave him 4 life sentences, but he will be eligible for parole after 25 years. He now resides in HMP Belmarsh in Thamesmead, southeast London, and is now 65 years of age, but could be back out on the streets in 13 years from now. That's it for today's video. I hope you found this one interesting. If you like this series, subscribe to the channel because we'll be releasing part 3 sooner than you think. Stick around because there's always something new to see here every single day. So hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.